Tonight's creation story. Shortly after life created man, it realized that many of them were too timid to directly confront the nature of existence. So it gave them the reassuring buffer of the concept of reality. P.S. This worked fine in general, but soon a few didn't like it. But hey, a moral. What the hell does life care what men... What the hell does life care what men like anyway? That's reality's job. Today's notable ad copy. Nothing comes between me and my understanding. The great mystical train ride. Those with a ticket, those with a ticket, those with a ticket are never alone. One man began to discover strange rubber balls in his backyard. Yet through it all continued to insist that he remains one of Europe's leading museums. Some dietary news. You can either indulge in familiar, comfy foods like chocolate, or partake again of mental items already heard, which first time round made you laugh, whether you understood and digested them or not. Papa, is that why the news changes so little from day to day? You mean from life to lifetime, don't you, son? Yes, Papa, even then. Why does the news change so little? Well, son, softly chuckled the old man, now we wouldn't want reality shifting so abruptly as to cause the simple to cancel their subscriptions. And this seemed to satisfy the lad, and shortly he asked, can I go out now and feed the birds? And the elder replied, just as long as you remember that you are one of them. And with a happy chirp, off the boy went. On this one planet of conscious creatures, the ultimate insult was to call another a fathead. But in their case, they internally mean it, literally. Just between him and his dog, one guy thought of his mythical TV show as the unexpected brought to you on a regular basis. To the mind, reality, if not life itself, is always out there, somewhere. Keeps things kind of neat and tidy. Weather conditions and the great mysterious trip. All local trains are clouded in mist. The warrior's ride is to refocus the light of the engine's eye. If for no other reason, the more alert would eschew criticism simply because of its vacidity. Some neighborhood kids were skipping and a-singing. Sticky is as sticky does, my mind draws thoughts as my navel does fuzz. And an adult stuck a head out a door and yelled, hey, you kids ain't from around here. Yet another distinguishing mark. Reality is always local. And now some news about the news. It defined. News. Gossip that the simple hope may affect them. A man asked the corner butcher, why is it so arranged that we're all excited and energetic when we're young and dumb, then start to wear down just about the time we're getting old enough to where we should actually know something? And the man with the kidneys in his hand replied, hey, what do I look like, the neighborhood astrologer or something? One man noted, drugs make my gums shrivel up. And someone asked him if he wasn't sure he didn't mean his gums. And he thought for a moment, then replied that he was certain that the shrinking was somewhere in his head. Moral, have not the perhaps ill-formed audacity to call thyself a bird brain till thou havest full understanding of what the bird may actually symbolize. Hark, hark, Horatio, cool it and chill till you know the deal. Under the most ordinary of circumstances, it is often difficult, verging on impossible, to understand intellectually why someone did a certain harmoniously driven thing. Ordinary knowledge is like diamonds in that neither have any intrinsic value, yet men have made them both seem otherwise. More regarding the matter between life and mere reality. Reality always takes itself seriously. Now for the invalids, the weak, and the fearful in our audience, an alternative version. Reality is Always serious. Schedules and the great mysterious train trip. It's never too late. It's never too late. Time's never up for those on the move. A certain man went to seek entry into a mystical school, and as the headmaster considered his application, he was told to stand over there and wait. And the man pointed down to the spot where he was standing and asked, "Here?" and was told no. And he moved several feet to the left and asked, "Here?" and was told no. So he moved over in the opposite direction and asked, "Here?" and was told no, and he began to suspect where this was going. Follow up to a previous nutrition story. How to become mentally overweight. Stuff your mind full of external stuff. Vision and how things are locally. To see reality does not require controlled attention. Why things seem so different to those in those two adjoining kingdoms I mentioned last time, as related to the building trades. Drywall men will never understand roofers. And there was once a land whose king announced a ban on allegories. He said that all available energies were needed to help develop their technology and science. Corpus callosums will never understand duodenums. Another train traveler's tip. Looking out the window's fun, but it won't hardly get the job done. Some advice, as always, that is only applicable to non-standard passengers and their unscheduled desired destination. Everybody else, you can keep on looking. The doctor of extreme optometry adds this comment. The strange eyesight of the transcendental traveler is such that he can see in both directions, in 3 directions, which is to say he can see in every possible direction, don't you see? Yeah. And in what may be a related story, a certain neurologist, strictly on the sly, now suggests some evidence that would show that those who can think in ways beyond the norm do not have brains divided into 2 hemispheres, but rather into at least 3, and perhaps even more south of the equator. Oh, your dollar. While these simpler public reflections of certain mythical possibilities say that to achieve any extraordinary ends, a man must be reborn. Note how they are silent on the immediate problem of first staying alive. Yes, it is. More commentary regarding the matter of the 2 big E's. Supra CF, circa page 4. Reality and the sense of human accomplishment. Life is proud of those for whom thinking is a reflex action. Whenever he didn't eat, this one man would feel dizzy and disoriented. Too bad this didn't work as regards his mind. Nutrition, nutrition, what be thy secret, immortal name? It wouldn't have helped if I had a skull in my hand. Right? Today's theological news. Gods live not in life, only in reality. Anchorman's addendum. That last story sent many local philosophers and critics scrambling for a new place to stay at. The speaker declaimed, one way you can always identify the simple is that they take life seriously. And the listener thought, why the hell would you want to identify the simple? The great mythical warfare brought to the local level. The battles the ordinary fight are with their own shadow on a nearby wall. The insides of a mystic's head resemble a large lake held back by a dam, but with no dam in sight. And a viewer writes, was that last item actually about the construction of man's routine mental awareness and how it separates what it perceives into divisible chunks? And lastly, of course, knowing you, a comment on how it could be otherwise. Sincerely, local trains run according to reality schedules, while the Mystical Express operates as per life. It is the mind that hails you to get on board with only you to help you disembark. How to tell if you are one of the simple. The appropriate use of forceful, conclusive cliches still make you knowingly smile and nod your head in agreement. The charity of local reality. Everyone will offer to help you, except those who can. Kids quiz. What's the opposite of glue? Focused attention? These kids. Knowledge that is not individual to the person is not knowledge that is personally useful, leastwise in endeavors such as this. Until the individual realizes that his mind will forever take itself seriously, travel to new locales as possible, not. A children's tale of the mysterious. A band of young seekers sought out a certain mystic with a request that they be permitted to stay and study with him, and he agreed, but gave them this immediate introductory statement. Only you can make this miraculous journey. All I can do is give travel advice. And afterwards, as they sat together talking, one of the neophytes said, I wonder if that's true. And another responded, well, even if it is true, it's also a way for him to, in advance, explain and excuse any failure on his part. And just then, the wise one walked by and added to their conversation. But time already that you realize that at the level of perceived reality, anything that seems true always explains and excuses what needs to be. And a mama mystic scolded her symbolic son. You shouldn't tell stories like that to children. And he replied, but how else to stop them from being so? As long as your thinking divides things up into in here and out there, your thinking cannot become sufficiently focused to ever develop further. The medical limits of local reality. There are no mortal cures for mortal-made ills. The doctor will be with you in a minute. Plus several other humor and the extraordinary journey. Just getting beyond the suburbs of Paris makes some people laugh. No. Query, why do some mystics talk so much? Who else is going to drown out the monotonous sounds of the wheels on the track so that the more demanding passengers might have the chance to think? One day life told local reality, if you keep feeding those birds, they'll never learn to hunt for themselves. And reality replied, but those aren't birds, those are humans. Some business news. One mystic named his enterprise Originality and Company. Reality equals expectations. Life equals surprises. Is it any wonder that most people favor reality over life? A mystic doesn't favor anything over life. As regards to what we were talking about last time, I don't remember what it was, and it doesn't matter. Why don't we talk about some of that? I was again tonight trying to get you to consider not just playing with words, but the idea of reality and then of life itself. Has two useful, specific meanings if you see it for yourself. It will short circuit all stumbles about that one may feel has some deep-rooted significance. Questions like why does most people seem to feel that there is some reality to religion, or things that apparently from an intellectual view have no validity, they strike you as being equally, at least, equally ridiculous, not true, questionable, problematic, useless, distracting, and yet you're faced with the fact that you're surrounded by the majority of humanity, those who are sane, stable, in charge of keeping things running smoothly, that believe otherwise. Religion's just one example. Politics, or as I was trying to get you to consider, in a way that at first makes some people want to, if not stumble, and that is, in one sense, intellectually speaking, everything that happens in the external world is irrelevant. To those driven by it, to those tied to it directly, CF, previous diagrams regarding simple people's eyes and the pulley of the external, that ordinary people cannot see that, and it's not true. But it's, to drag in even more, how about the one as far as entertainment and how the external world operates ordinarily, is that a person, let's use television, that a more perceptive person, rather than having any criticism of the great world of commercial television, would have the motto, PBS for me, commercial TV for everyone else. Didn't want to get too simple. Ordinary people must find the external world to be of significance. Intellectually. Remember, there's no question over it physically being of unequaled importance, because the external physically is where everything comes from. That a man within this closed system, a man physically is not his own closed system, and therefore everything that is necessary for physical survival is external. And yet, internally, it is not the same situation. It appears to be to the ordinary mind. If you get past that, you simply understand the reality behind the kind of parables and religious myths attributed to the so-called spiritual figures, founders of religion, that always have them bad-mouthing wealth, financial success, making the comments about that it's easier for a hippopotamus to go through the eye of a needle. I was going to do one about some eye of a needle, and it is for a rich man to enter into a new state of consciousness. Again, it's a childish, crude, but understandable reflection of what I'm telling you, that once you understand the basis of man's intellectual life as it now stands, and assuming that you're engaged in trying to reach the kingdom of God, the other state of consciousness, then everything in the external world is not per se in some way evil. It is not the work of the devil, the gold and the wealth that religions, especially poor people in religions, are those who may not be poor but who are seeking to make you same by your contributions to their upkeep. It is not that there is some indigenous evil about wealth. All they took was the simple, childish, literal reflection of that which was originally metaphorical, and that is that a man, a mystic, a Jesus, a Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, etc., they simply understood that what goes on out here intellectually is irrelevant. I keep playing around. I make it sound cruder and say the mystic doesn't give a goddamn what happens out there. Try to get your attention, and it's not that negative. It's just simply irrelevant. It has nothing to do with an individual trying to do something extraordinary with his own consciousness. That which is an internal need has no external nourishment. You're just wasting your time, unless you're just engaged in a hobby, unless you're just a weekend would-be mystic. So you have the external world being of no great consequence, and yet man's ordinary mind cannot explain it. And I was trying to get you now to consider the difference that I'm trying to point out in general between me using the terms life and reality. Sort of what I've used in the past of local conditions, but life is what crude people probably would want to say they mean by God. But now you people know I do not, and ordinary people that would say God in the sense of it being an extra systemic force of some kind if you don't see it, I will not mislead you when I tell you that they have no idea whatsoever of what they think they see. They've got the insight, they've got the understanding of any ordinary person when they're 5 or 6 years old, at the latest. Probably at the age of 2 or 3 when they holler, food, food, and their mother gives them some food. Their understanding of what goes on insofar as the nourishment, insofar as their relationship between them and the external world has not progressed past that. Therefore, they look upon that which is non-physical as being on the same footing as that which is physical, that everything a human needs physically is external. Life cannot be described. There's nothing to say about life. The reason I did the little sidestep about God is some of this, throughout history, people continue to try and drag in descriptions of omnipresence, omnipotent, omni-everything having to do with God, and then we'll say, in fact, God cannot be described, and then they continue to do so. Well, at the very least, that's not just sarcasm or irony. They have no choice. If they stand up, an ordinary man says, well, God is not just a person writ large. God is, especially if they got a college education, they go, God is indescribable. Although they will continue to point out to you, based upon their own denomination, that he may be indescribable, but he is for damn sure a Lutheran. Or Jew or Muslim or Baptist. See, they can't let it go. They're still operating within a closed system in their own mind, and they do not realize it. That's why they love such terms as infinite, omnipresent, omnipotent, because it's like, if you can talk about exotic places, when you know you're never going to get far from home, it seems to make people feel better. For those of you that didn't get that from last time. And they do know that they're never going to stray far from home. Well, they don't want to. Nobody does. It is uncomfortable. So they can throw around the words of God. They like to describe the idea of an Allah, a supreme being, and they will tell you his attributes. After saying he cannot be described, it's beyond the comprehension of mere mortals. But then it makes them feel good, and nobody questions it, that they will go ahead and describe the old guy. That they'll even say he's indescribable, other than, again, being an Episcopalian or Methodist. There's nothing to say. Anything you say about life is reality. Anything you say about life, the opening creation story I gave you for today, was that, I made it real simple, but that life, after it created man got to thinking, which is say that man was actually created. That life realized that many of them were so timid, they seemed to be frightened, that things did not seem to be taking the kind of aggressive line of evolution that it had in mind. It's just a story. And it looked and it realized that some of them seemed somewhat off-put, frightened, timid, hesitant, because once you can think about life, you got a whole new ball game. I mean, if we're going to start out and try and compare for the sake of our discussion, that we start off at just the physical level, prior to man having an intellect, to you having an intellect, that we were creatures out there in the wild, or even in Detroit. We have no mind, and so we're in the same level. We've got the same attitude toward life as a lion in the next block. But then once you're in a lion in the next block, any animal, man from the level of consciousness down, it's moot. It's useless. It's silly to talk about any human emotion. Talk about fear. Now animals, you can turn around and you can say, well, that animal's fearful. That deer is running from a cougar. But to attribute a human emotion to that is incorrect. Because at the level below that of consciousness, of mental awareness, there is no such thing as timidity, fear, hesitancy. It's simply eat or be at. You're either out for dinner or you're going to be somebody's dinner. So either, you're going to run and catch what you need to eat today, while simultaneously keeping the other eye out to run from what would like to have you as an hors d'oeuvre, if not full course meal. So the idea of being fearful and timid, do you understand? Animals are not timid. And again, the closest it comes to it is domesticated animals. For those of you that like to, some of you begin to observe yourself, You have to figure extract the influence that man has had on so-called domesticated animals, which is the operational definition of a domesticated animal. That is, that man in some way has been able to almost put his hand in their nervous system, figuratively speaking, and not reprogram it, but scramble the program slightly. Animals in general, excluding gerbils and dogs. All right, gerbils, dogs. All right, cats and parrots. All right, your Uncle Lal up in the attic, I know. So you thought I forgot about him. I know about him. And I know sometimes it is hard to ignore him, and we know how you try. Doing that with a stick doesn't help. If anything, with an ordinary tenant, if you're an ordinary thinking tenant, it makes it worse, as you know. It's like hollering to traffic. Would you guys hold it down out there? Or, if you like it more specific, attain your mind. Would you please shut up? And it goes, all right, you want more cynical humor? You tell your mind, won't you shut up? And it goes, should I do that? Do your own. Would you tell your mind, because everyone's done it, would you shut up? You know, like you're driving me crazy, I can't go to sleep. Would you shut up? And your mind goes, you fill it in. All of the attempts where we were to describe why life is not describable, to describe why human existence seems incapable of being understood, and we're not talking about science and technology and mathematical models of the universe and etc. We're talking about ordinary, educated, civilized artists, thinkers, philosophers, theologians, ordinary people agree to varying degrees that there's no way to explain life. It can't be understood. There are too many imponderables, there are too many uncertainties, there are too many cul-de-sacs, there are too many conundrums, there are too many paradoxes, and by then, who wants to try to talk to them anyway? They've won. That is, your mind's won. You're going, has everybody filled it in? And so you turn your mind and say, why don't you shut up? And your mind goes, that's better than a coloring book. It doesn't have any real dots. It doesn't have any real lines in which you must keep your crayon. There is nothing that you can say about life. Anything you say about life turns it into reality. And the only way, back to my creation story, or the way that ended up in our part of the universe, our part, is that life saw that men were not operating in as aggressive, forthright manner as it apparently had in mind because of the intellect. It added as it always does in a three-dimensional world, it added a new weapon, it added a new talent to man that no other creature had, but simultaneously it added what appeared to be a new burden. Because if we're going to take a sparrow and decide we'll give it a new weapon, how much do they charge to deliver pizza or Chinese instantly on the phone? I was just wondering why I don't get more for instant allegories and parables to stagger even the most sane of people. Say if we were going to arm a sparrow to give it what appeared to be, to say the least, an upper hand out in the aviary world, and we arm it with a bazooka. Or if that's hard to picture, a 9mm. It can take care of hawks. It can take care of anything, right? Except now that he's got it, he can hardly fly. You understand? Because of the added weight. There is validity to even that instant egg foo parable, but delivered to your door instantly. But it is true that in a three-dimensional setting, everything that you can see, that you can spot, and you can do it in even more specific instances in a person in your life, that at the three-dimensional perception, everything that you apparently get, anything that you have gained, in a way, you don't have to search for it, but in a very specific way, if you look, is giving you a new burden. Well, you might say responsibility, but the thing is, they added 10 over in your plus column, and now you've run up a bill of 10. Or picture, I like my sparrow with a bazooka. The only problem is, it doesn't have a shoulder upon which to put it. How about a switchblade? Life looked, after it created man, life looked and saw that many were too timid, and to create a kind of comforting buffer. It was a kind of reassurance. Once the mind's already going, and now men, and I'm giving you a range, look at yourself, timid, self-conscious. How about that? Maybe that, because it doesn't mean, when I say that life saw that many men were too timid about the nature of existence, it is not just, and it's strictly not physical fear. Remember, we're not talking about the kind of animal, the instinctive animal running from that which would consume you. We're not talking about that kind of intrinsic unthinking caution. It's just part of the reaction of each member of the physical food chain, the appropriate action. What life saw, according to my little story, was it saw men, once it made them conscious in the common vernacular of the term, it then saw that many of them seemed too self-conscious. That's what I mean by timid. That is that you no longer step forward with the same kind of, many times, vigor, certainty, once you're a thinking creature, that you would were you not sane. Example, thank you. One reason that men, especially men apparently, or more humans, enjoy alcohol in many cases is that there's people going out to a party, people going out to a bar, any kind of new environment. People do it before they go for a job interview. But look at it kind of a hormonal level, that is a physical level. You're going out to a party and you don't have a date, and it's going to be strange people, and they may be your superiors, they may be your financial betters, and it's very common, thousands of years old, to take a couple of drinks, and it's that kind of feeling. I'll do a man version, which is crude enough. Women, the guy, there you are sober and you're getting dressed and trying to put on your rented tuxedo, and you look, you've had already 20 or 30 years where you look in the mirror and you're amazed that you've ever got laid in your life. You look at, and you get nervous and all sweaty, and you just know you're going to make an ass of yourself. You can just see yourself walking into this great mansion or some country club to which you have been accidentally invited. You just know the feeling. And remember, I want you to understand that there is a specific, noticeable difference. And it's not good or bad. It's not a slam on alcohol or social tea dancing. But now that you have an intellect, keep in mind my story, my creation story, life realized that once you have a intellectual consciousness, that many, my story said many men, many of the creatures, then no longer, or were then timid, too timid about their confrontation with the direct nature of existence then, because they're now no longer simply physical creatures. Men will take a drink because of the fact that, let's jump ahead in the story, that there they are, they realize it, they've been through it, that there they are later without the alcohol. They're standing there picturing, looking into themselves, and it's time to go, and they realize that I walk in there and I might trip and knock over a potted plant. I may bump into the butler. I may even mispronounce butler. The person just knows this will not do. And especially if they've had any experience with alcohol, and there it is in their house, their apartment, they know. They take a couple of drinks, and sure enough, it has an effect, a chemical effect on the brain, and it diminishes that feeling of self-consciousness. We all know that. Have two or three, and it's very common for a man who normally looks like Junior Samples to have two or three drinks and suddenly look in the mirror and begin to realize from an angle how strikingly close he looks to Robert Redford. And for some reason, 2 beers in the trash can took away like 20 pounds also. It's an old story. Everybody knows it, but there is a quite specific, and not psychological problems unique to that individual. It is the fact that the mind, having an intellect then, a consciousness, compared, and I mean just the simple, the most minimal use of that term, that man now has an intellect, that he is in general not, he just simply does not operate in that same direct, forceful manner as an animal would. He's not supposed to, you understand. That's not the problem right now. But he does not. So my creation story, life looked down and realized that whereas man at one time, let's say, was marching right along out in the wilds with as much force, with as much physical vigor and bravery as a lion. Taking into consideration his size and all. And now suddenly he's got a consciousness. Whereas now he can do things. He can, as they say, think abstractly. He can run up phone bills. He can dial a phone. He can add up figures. He can make lists. And now, which is better than the lion. And so now he has been given a superior talent to the lion. But in hand with that, he now seems to have lost part of his bravado, some of his physical certainty. Because animals, and man physically, were it not for the intellect, whatever you do physically, if you're genetically sound, a lion does not make missteps. If you remember my story from last time about the two adjoining kingdoms and the strange connection, that one of the peoples lived a very simple, direct physical life, engaging only in activities which were specifically beneficial to their continued physical well-being and health. Whereas the adjoining land, the people lived more reflective, much more complex lives. And in fact, would engage in activities that by any reasonable observation would appear to be detrimental to their own self-interest. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Back to where we are now. The body, under all general conditions, your body and a good sound lion, without any genetic brain damage, a lion will not misstep. A lion will not step into a place wherein he might experience physical chagrin. Read a bigger lion whip his ass and eat him. All right? A lion would not, were it capable, to mix up the metaphors, would not go to a social soiree wherein he would already realize, well, I'm going to feel out of place. Maybe it's a fancy dance and they said, please everyone wear your giraffe tux. And he realized, well, even if I could find one, if I rent it, it's not going to fit. I'm going to look out of place. But a lion has no recourse to alcohol. But you understand, given ordinary conditions, he will not misstep. He is not going to do anything detrimental to his own self-interest. He cannot. If he does, by his own definition, he is going to be eaten. He is going to be part of at least an individual dead end genetically. Survival of the fittest, as they used to call it in high school. So if he does misstep, if he does jump into a swollen river, as far as I know, lions are not given to swimming anyway, but if he did something like that, or he looked over and he saw food over there, and there was a chasm between two cliffs, and the cliff over there was 100 feet away, and the lion went, no, and jumped, and need I fill in the rest? Any lion that jumps 100 feet, or attempts to jump 100 feet gap, is going to fail, shall we say, probably miserably. So that would be a misstep. A lion, a physically sound lion, is not going to do that. You take men, you take now lions and put brains on them, let's call them men. Physically, they still would not misstep. They would, and if they ended up in a situation, back to my fancy country club with their financial and social betters, even should they some way end up there, they would not find it to be a misstep. It would not cause them any degree of embarrassment. Remember, at the physical level, embarrassment would be death at the extreme. Like the lion attempting to jump. He thinks, I'm a lion, and it's 100 foot, and he leaps, and about halfway over, let's say halfway, I'll make it 50 feet, and he leaps about halfway over. He suddenly gets real embarrassed. You follow? Those of you that watch cartoons, because he went in this direction, that kind of lateral momentum, and then suddenly as they draw it, he stops, and he looks in the camera, and looks real embarrassed, because he's about to go. That was physical embarrassment. That is a physical misstep. That is doing that which is not in your physical best interest. And under ordinary conditions, any creature genetically sound will not do that. Now back to man, remember. Here it is, a man, once he's given consciousness, then apparently will not only misstep, but then is apparently, even before misstepping, has an awareness of it, will have a fear of it. Back to my story, the person going on a blind date or with no date and going to an affair that he considers he may be ill-equipped socially to handle, and he'll take a drink. He knows I am going to be timid. I know that there's every possibility in the world I'll be embarrassed, therefore I will dull my consciousness. I will dull my awareness of my surroundings. I will try and push some of the effect my intellect has over my body, which is what drinking is. That's why drinking's always been more popular, besides usually it's less expensive, but it's always more popular than the psychedelic drug, because it works directly on a very important, to many people, continuing situation regarding the timidity of human existence. And alcohol, just within a matter of minutes, will get right in the blood, and if you're in a real social pinch, you can take pure grain, well, not pure grain, but you can take alcohol, and put it in a hypodermic and put it right in your veins to skip that 2 or 3 additional minutes, which sometimes can seem like hours to those socially uncomfortable, before it can seep through the stomach lining and get to the brain. Of course, as an aside, a medical anomaly, I did know a guy that I pointed out one time, and I caught him later trying to find out how to get needles directly into his brain. That's really in a hurry. Life now has made creatures, made man, but then realized that many of them were too timid regarding the direct confrontation with their existence. So just, picture there it is that man, you individually, humanity collectively. 1 billion years ago, 1,000 years, picture your own little cartoon. That there it is, humans suddenly given the intellect. I say suddenly, after some period of time. And they find they do not have the same relationship, individual. They find that they do not feel that same kind of direct connection. They do not feel that same kind of bravery. Or it's better, let me go back to my description and put it on the negative side. They then, for the first time, have an awareness of a kind of timidity, a kind of uncertainty as to what to do next. Whereas when they were simply physical, if there was such a time, you understand, if they were back before they had an intellect, back to the lion stage, the animal stage, there is no uncertainty. You're programmed absolutely. Even intellects, even intellectual people now will go along with that. Well, yes, it seems that animals are just programmed, absolutely, which is what separates us from the animals. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm not going to say anything. The man was good enough to lay himself a used example. I'm not going to comment. But anyway, the ordinary intellect can't accept that animals are absolutely programmed to do that, which is animal-like. The hippos are programmed to hippo it up and nothing else. Hippos got no business trying to burrow in the ground and chase rodents, or they got no business trying to get up in the limbs and build nests and fly. Hippos are programmed absolutely to hippo. Men, once they're given an intellect, life looked down and found that they were now subject to states, spells, fits, continuing funks of uncertainty, that they just seemed too timid, that things they did not press on as they had been before the intellect was, before the consciousness was given to them. So life gave man a kind of buffer, a kind of cushion. I could have said that life looked at it as being a temporary arrangement, but all that kind of sidetrack, boxcar shifting, shuffling around, you can surely do for yourself. To give them a kind of cushion. It was almost as though it grabbed them from a primordial state, a state of just being an absolutely programmed animal, and sort of jerked them out and said, well, here you are. And Adam, Eve, everybody, I'm suggesting to you, well, what in the hell is this? Life thought, boy, I got a surprise for you. I mean, I'm going to let hippos stay hippos and hawks stay hawks, but come here. And he grabbed man, there's the man, looking like you're, looking like, we won't go into, but this. And it grabbed man and says, come here. Boy, have I got a surprise for you. And jerks him out of the garden, out of the silent place, jerks him out and says, you are now man. And life was, let's say, I like my little picture of it, just delighted, boy, aren't you going to be happy? Which is also, if you're back to my other story, the other version, that was the moment that you and life, that life looked you dead in the eye. And life said, huh? And life just thought, boy, you're going to be, and you went, and you glanced off, and you suddenly you fill in your own time frame. went, what in the hell is this? Or some of the creation stories have it that God originally created man somewhere in the deep south. And so that sounds sort of like Alabama creation. But there he was, suddenly in the light, suddenly given an intellect, and life thought, huh? And just momentarily, man had the possibility of going, and looking back at life, and would have been, well, I'm making it too complicated. But anyway, there it was, and life said, huh? And the man went, what in the hell is this? Then life thought, well, wait a minute. So after some length of time to life, you fill it in, whatever you made, it thought, well, he now seemed to have slowed down his kind of forthrightness, his kind of direct confrontation with life. Whereas he no longer faces new situations. He no longer faces life. He no longer faces his existence with the same kind of abruptness, the same kind of blunt forthrightness as he did prior to me giving him a So it thought, wait a minute. And so, according to my story, according to my interpretation of my story, life was not prepared to reach down and grab the intellect and rip it back out and go, uh-oh, mistake. Now, for one thing, life doesn't like to be embarrassed. Like life jumped halfway between physical creatures and intellectual creatures, and halfway through the jump, man was going, what's this? And life went, uh-oh. See, life doesn't like that, which is why you see damn few cartoons about life. Roadrunners, foxes, pigs, even reality, but not life. So according to my interpretation of my story, life, after it saw that it has created a certain kind of apparent impediment in man's previous direct confrontation with life, similar to all the other physical creatures, rather than reach down and admit defeat, it went, wait a minute. It gave it sunglasses, rose-colored glasses, gave it a kind of cushion, kind of took the immediate shock, the immediate perception, the immediate kind of eyesight that man had, and kind of, for those of you who didn't get that other traveler's trip, to point out that all local trains are clouded in a mist. That's reality. That's what local means tonight. It's like life went, well, instead of jerking the brain out and start all over his awareness, wait a minute. And so it gave the mind the ability to come up with this concept of reality, which is always out there. It is not you. It's not. I know the mind will tell you otherwise. The mind will say, well, now part of it's out there, certainly, but when I think about it, that's not reality. I'm thinking, yeah, it is. When life gave man's mind the ability to conceive of a reality, that took off the immediate, according to my interpretation of my own story, the kind of unexpected impediment, hindrance, hobble that man seemed to have picked up through having been given an intellect, which life did not expect to have that kind of effect on him physically. Thank you. It is a diffusion of consciousness. It is a clouding. It is a misting. And it cannot be seen as all religions, even though they don't use the terms, and all cults, all public forms of mysticism. It's always that something's wrong and we've got to return, we've got to straighten things out. Once you see this, you understand why man believes that. But it was not a curse, if you will take my interpretation of my story. It was not that life looked down at man and thought, well, you simple, son of a bitch, I gave you a brain and now look, it slowed you down. It was supposed to, make your things go better. And after a while, man could talk back and say, well, it did. It is going better. I invented the wheel. I got fire. And sure enough, things did go better. But again, it's like they gave a sparrow, how about one of those rocket packs to make you fly even faster? But think how many generations of physical evolution it would take in the sparrow world for them to develop a sparrow strong enough to ever get off the ground to use the rocket pack, to really make it where they could hover around in one of these things like in a James Bond movie. And so even though man did start making progress, at the same time he kept, in a sense, complaining about it. He still found, well, sure, I've invented the wheel, but now every time I get ready to use the wheel, now I made myself a car and I go out on a blind date, I feel so self-conscious, I have to go get something to drink before I can even get in the car to go to the date. And then sometimes, here it is, I invent the wheel, and worse than that, now the police have the wheel, and they'll stop me for drunk driving. Do you follow all that? In other words, man said, well, yeah, it's helped me a lot. Or even life says, you have done better, but it seems like you run 2 steps forward, and then you won't trip, or you won't sit down, or you go 2 or 3 steps forward, and then you go. And I'm sure life finally said, hey, I didn't create you to learn to do the tango. Keep marching. And man goes. But once you've got a conception of reality, it does ease the uncertainty. It eases the discomfort. The ordinary mind does not know this because it has nothing to compare it to. You only know it once you get free from it. But the whole idea of reality turns what would have been the direct confrontation with life, what is the direct confrontation with life at the non-neural level, but it turns it then into an area open to absolute debate, matters of opinion. That it's not like life is life. In reality is, well, all right, let's see. Then we could start doing this. Well, let's see. I am a mathematician, or I'm an economist. I'll tell you what life is. Life is a matter of haves and have-nots. Or, no, I'm a politician. It's a matter of either having power or having power exercised on you. The theologian says, I'm a theologian. They say, shut up. Well, they want to. Since the mighty days in the West of King Henry VIII, been damn few people in the external world had the balls to stand up and say it, which is just proof again of an example of my tonight's creation story. Thinking that reality, operating on the base, well, thinking is what it amounts to. You got no choice. That reality is actually something. And I could discuss it forever and ever from different ways, slightly different ways. But that out there is something, not only that is something, which is bad enough from a mystic's view. When I say bad enough is distraction enough. But that out there is something. That is not in here, that's obvious. I mean, you're not me, and that wall's not me. This stool is not my emotions, and this rug is not my deepest concerns. And it's not me. So as long as there is an out there, you've had it. That is, you're comforted. You can ride there and bounce on the train and the monotony of the click, click, click of the wheels running over where the tracks meet. If you're sane, you can kind of bob your head along and doze off and on for another 30, 40, 50 years. And sure enough, before you ever get to Paris, you die and they throw you off the train. But at least you don't have anything to worry about. Well, plus between here and there, you can nod and dream we'll be in Paris at any minute now. The job has been done, and you are limited in a way that you cannot realize until you're free from it, that you're sensing that a reality is out there. The physical world's there. There's no doubt about that. It's not that old philosophical game that Philosophy 101 students like to play, hanging around drinking espresso coffee by the gallon. It's not that, wait, does reality actually exist out there? Does reality exist without someone to perceive it? All that. It's not that. Out there exists, physically. But reality doesn't exist. Reality is the kind of comfort, reality is the kind of cushion that life gave man to sit on. Once it gave him a mind, and he could sit down and think, well, I'm going to ride this train, now I'm on it. And yet, he no longer is out there having to run alongside of a line. Now it's like he could invent, he could produce technology and develop, manufacture a train, and now he can sit down. He can let something else carry him along. He thinks it's an internal combustion or a steam engine. So it's carrying him along. But in the same way it carries him along, it took away part of the physical wherewithal, the physical certainty. So as long as you continue to operate, as long as a man's mind operates on the basis that there is a reality. Again, not the philosophical child's play of, oh, there's no such thing as reality, it's just what our mind. No, out there exists. But to think that reality is out there and that reality is something else, you're on the train forever, going nowhere. To believe that the reality out there is subject to opinion, that the reality out there, and to the ordinary mind, that's the height of foolishness for me to raise the possibility that's otherwise. Because everyone's mind knows. Everyone's mind knows that reality is subject to opinion. Of course, an ordinary mind knows that most opinions, the reason is that they don't understand like I do what reality is. Because reality, I can see quite clearly, being the Baptist Italian that I am, Baptist German, that out there is German and Italian and Baptist. Or out here is Jewish and whatever. What's out here is Buddhist and Chinese is reality. Well, it's supposed to be, of course. But being an ordinary sane person, the one part I'm playing will go, well, that's true. Now, that should be reality. That is the basic reality. That's the proper reality. But there are people around who have a misconstrued, a distorted view of reality. In other words, whose opinion disagrees with mine. Anyone whose perception of reality. The point being, even though they would try to explain that as being a matter of errors in judgment, it's not. It is simply that if reality, to your thinking, is subject to, it doesn't mean properly or improperly, as long as reality to your mind is subject to personal interpretation, to opinion, which, to put it to you people crudely, anytime you look around what's going on with other people and you think, God damn, there you are. That's all it takes. Known as the big C, criticism. Forget cancer. Cancer's fine. Cancer will just kill you. Criticism will do you in. That reality is always criticism. It's always open to opinion. That is not life. But you understand the kind of cushion, the protection it gives you breathing space, to say the least. But it's like a cushion, an invisible one, between you and life is reality. Reality is what the mind makes of life. A more conscious mind doesn't make anything of life. There's nothing to be made of life. Well, unless you're ordinary, and then something must be made of it, or you'd go crazy. Well, there you are. So when someone more conscious then is someone who's crazy and yet not. Okay. Doesn't show. Okay. Hadn't been caught. Okay. Yet not. Okay.